Good morning. I am Kathy Hummel, even though my name tag's out in the car. So, as I was looking over resources for this sermon, I came across these wise anonymous, or is that anonymous? Anonymous words of wisdom. There's a fine line between a long, drawn-out sermon and a hostage situation. I worked very hard to keep today's sermon a bit shorter than my usual hostage taking, because the Board of Directors and the Committee on Ministry are hoping you will be willing to stay after the service for about an hour, sustained by pizza and snacks, to do some important priority setting for the ministry of this church. And by ministry, I don't mean only by those nouns, our minister, Ann Evans, and our Director of Religious Growth and Learning, Sarah Kelly. I mean shared ministry. That is, minister as a verb, not just a noun, but an action verb that requires all of us to do the acting. The concept of shared ministry grows out of some very practical concerns. We are an organization, like most, that must live within our means financially if we are to survive. We can have the most charismatic minister and the voices of the heavenly host in the choir. We can have the most beautiful building. We're working on it. But if we can't turn the lights on or pay the mortgage or fulfill our larger mission, none of those things matter. But even more important than the financial imperatives for shared ministry are the spiritual imperatives. Just as we can't survive as a church on an empty or inadequate bank account, we can't survive as a spiritual community if we see ourselves as consumers only, not as participants with investment and ownership. Financially, yes, but in action and commitment as well. Look at those 7 principles on the back of our program. Not one of them mentions buildings or ministers or high-end appliances in the kitchen. They speak of commitment to a set of values, none of which we could accomplish as well or at all as we can within the strength and numbers of this religious community. The phrase, "it takes a village," has been used so often as to become almost meaningless. And yet that is exactly what we come to do, to be part of a spiritual village, to support each other, to provide a safe and loving environment for our children to grow into responsible adults, and to encourage all of us to grow and reach to make the world, whether near or far, a better place. But everyone needs to contribute to this village, or the task is overwhelming for those who try, who persevere, and maybe eventually burn out. This need to spread the work to accomplish the mission is hardly new. Look at poor Moses, who begged the Lord to help him bear his heavy burden of providing for his people. The Lord obliged and gave a good talking to the 70 elders that he had Moses gather. I'm sure Ann and Sarah would be thrilled to have 70 elders, or middle-agers, or millennials, or youth to help them share their load. They'd probably be thrilled with 12 disciples. But if you read further in the stories, you'll find that not everybody followed through with the job assigned as well as promised. And that's the challenge in shared ministry as well. Shared ministry takes time and commitment. It asks that each of us seeks to recognize within ourselves those gifts and talents that we are called upon to share. To see need where it hasn't even yet been identified. To have the courage to see ourselves as worthy to join this remarkable mission of this church and of the larger mission of the UUA. When I was listening to the coverage of John McCain's extended funeral services, one of the many commentators quoted a line from a novel by George Eliot, who of course was really a woman named Mary Ann Evans. Go figure. This woman commentator offered the quotation in response to some of the naysayers who relished reminding the public of some of John McCain's less heroic episodes in his life, whether they were all true or false, of which we all probably have some. The quotation is, "The important work of moving the world forward does not wait to be done by perfect men." And since George Eliot was really a woman, I would add by perfect women. Sometimes you may be hesitant to volunteer, to find a way into a group or take up a job that has been done and done well by others. But acceptance and growth are part of the mission of this church. Boundaries are made to be broken. And like George Eliot, gender stereotypes have no place, and we use any religious resources we can to help move our world forward. For example, there was the story of the UU coffee chairwoman who was having difficulty finding enough volunteers to make coffee every Sunday after the service. She had tapped many of the women in the congregation and was running out of options as the women began to question why they should be making the coffee every week. By chance, the coffee chairwoman saw a group of the congregation's men chatting after the service and overheard one of them complaining because no one had made coffee. She slipped into the UU library and pulled a copy of the Bible, next to the Quran, out and approached the group. She announced to the men that they should decide which one of them would make the coffee next week. When they began to protest, the chairwoman said, "It's in the Bible." The self-proclaimed leader of the men's group snorted, "It is not. Show me." The chairwoman opened her Bible to one of the New Testament books and declared, "It says right here, Hebrews." Cheap, I know. Hopefully, I did not gender offend any of our very capable men who volunteer for coffee hour or our intrepid women who take on landscaping and maintenance duties. But you get the point, and I'm sure there are comparable references in other sacred texts as well. But this brings up a chance to highlight two very important needs in the business of this congregation right now. We need someone to step up to chair the hospitality committee and someone to head up a committee on pastoral care. Taking on either of these responsibilities doesn't require that you do all the work yourself, but that you are willing to facilitate and organize the efforts of others to provide these services. As you can tell from my previous story, coffee hour and potlucks and special events and services are very important to UUs, as they should be. Part of being a member of a village is to have the opportunity to connect and share in informal ways, and nothing provides a better sense of community, a communion, if you will, than sharing food and friendship. Now, Chris Chu, she isn't here this morning, but I checked with her. She's been very hospitable for a number of years, and she would like to extend that hospitality by offering another member of the village this wonderful opportunity to take over that role. And I'm sure Chris will be very hospitably helping anyone with a smooth transition should you decide to step into that role. And a critical task or opportunity is to provide support and services for those members who are in need. A pastoral care or caring committee can assume some of those duties that are important but sap precious hours and energy from our professional staff. We need someone to step up to organize volunteers to do things like send cards, organize meal delivery, visit someone in need if that is within your comfort level. In short, we need to enable our professional staff to spend their time doing those things that cannot easily be assumed by lay people. Enable is often used in a negative way to indicate helping someone to continue with an undesirable habit or behavior. But in this context, we truly need to enable our professional ministry, to free them up to perform those tasks and provide the support that we are paying them to do. Shared ministry in no way diminishes the important functions that fall primarily to our professional staff, be it leading services, participating in rites of passage, providing pastoral care, and developing and delivering quality ethical curriculum. Yet even within these categories, you'll see later today, primarily assigned to professional staff, there are opportunities for lay people as well. In Ann's in-gathering service, she had the children pass out paper drops of water and asked that during the silent meditation, congregants should think about how they, as small drops of water, contribute, as Ann put it, to the love that this faith community enjoys here and with which we nourish our valley and beyond. There are many ways for you to live, the active verb, to minister. How will you sustain and grow this congregation? What would your life be like if this community did not exist? I'll end with this obituary that appeared in a newsletter, an old church newsletter, and I think it's an old nugget, but it's probably appropriate for our message today. It reads, "Our church was saddened to learn this week of the death of one of our most valued members, someone else. For many, many years as a part of this church, someone else did far more than a normal person share the work. Whenever there was a job to do, a class to teach, or a meeting to attend, everybody said, let someone else do it. Whenever leadership was mentioned, this wonderful person was looked to for inspiration as well as results. Someone else can work with that group. It was common knowledge that someone else was among the most generous givers. Whenever there was a financial need, everyone assumed someone else would make up the difference. Now someone else is gone. We wonder what we're going to do. Someone else left a wonderful example to follow, but who is going to follow it? Who is going to do the things someone else did? Today after the service, we hope you'll join us to look at the 9 areas of service and duties of UU ministry, you see them around the wall here, created as part of the handbook entitled Fulfilling the Call, a model of UU ministry in the 21st century. At the UUCSV annual congregational meeting on May 13th, 2018, the congregation voted to complete the Fulfilling the Call process by December 31 of this year. Today's activity, which will be repeated after the service next week as well, will help us evaluate ministry as a whole, not only professional staff, so that the minister can more effectively fulfill the expectations of the congregation. It will ask you to think not only about those areas you may already be serving, but to recognize within yourself other ways you might share a talent or a skill. We cannot think of the work of this congregation being fulfilled by only a minister. We need to think of the work of this congregation, of all of us, to minister, as our contribution to this village. When you do minister, you will help this congregation. You will help people within and without this village, and you will help yourself. You will be part of something greater, even if by one seemingly small measure. You will be valued as a part of the mission of this church. So when you're asked to help this year, remember, we can't depend on someone else anymore.